The Scole Experiment. You are seated in the darkened basement of a farmhouse that dates back to the 17th century. Suddenly, a medium begins to speak in a harsh, strained voice. The words are unclear, so close to distinguishable, perhaps in a foreign language. Bursts of light appear. Out of nowhere, small red spheres dart across the room and vanish. And then a loud thunk. An object materializes on the table as though it has fallen straight from the ceiling. It's a coin, ancient and cool to the touch. But where has it come from? How has a solid object just appeared out of nowhere? Welcome, travelers. You've landed alongside the wandering soul, and today we're taking a haunted journey through the Scole Experiment. So sit back and listen to some remarkable tales, some legendary, some verified, of England's 5-year experiment into making contact with those misty denizens from across the Vale. And while you're here, please remember to follow, like, and tell your friends where to find us. The Scole Experiment began with a simple, basic question. What if occurrences like seances and paranormal activities could be studied under scientific terms? What if a group met regularly under strictly defined conditions and made attempts at contacting the dead? And more amazingly, what if these experiments resulted in demonstrable proof, photographic images, objects materializing out of thin air, and even direct contact with spirits from beyond? These very experiments were conducted not 100 or 200 years ago, but as recently as 1998. Two couples began the experiment run under the mantle of England's Society for Psychical Research. Robin and Sandra Foy, who owned the reportedly haunted street farmhouse that housed the experiment, and Alan and Diana Bennett began their experiments, setting out to provide proof of life after death. The Foys and Bennetts were members of the Society for Psychical Research, and it is important to note that the members of the Society were not blind believers in the paranormal. They sought to expose fraud when they saw it, but also sought to prove by scientific means that life after death did exist. The Society itself was founded in 1882, along with the rise of spiritualism. And while claims of paranormal activity were on the rise, the debate remained, was this activity natural and explainable? Or did the actions of mediums and psychics point to some innate yet undiscovered human ability? In the Society's early years, more than 700 experiments were cataloged and examined. The Foys and Bennetts would add to these experiments and produce results that are still studied today. So what were the conditions set by the two couples? First, the seances must take place in total darkness, apparently to better foster conditions for the mediums. Any objects brought into the room were cataloged, the sessions were recorded, and any participants coming into the room were searched. The initial requirements sounded reasonable as scientific constraints, all that is, except for the need for complete darkness. While luminous bands were used to track the movements of participants, there was no guarantee that no shenanigans occurred. But remarkable in the face of this was the consistency of the experiments. Hundreds of seances or sittings took place under the same conditions each time. The only variations happened when a visitor, a scientist or skeptic, insisted upon more rigorous controls. The Foys and Bennetts theorized that keeping the conditions the same would encourage spirits to continue to return, to establish a place of familiarity so that the spirits would make themselves known. One of the first phenomena observed were the lights. Small, bright, and colorful lights were said to dart around the room. The lights reacted to commands by those present, so that they seemed to have an intelligence about them. Another occurrence that happened repeatedly was the sudden appearance of apports. Apports are objects that spontaneously materialize into a room, often appearing to fall out of nowhere. The list of apports during the Scole experiments is impressive. Coins, jewelry, a handkerchief, a thimble, a war medal. The complaint may be made that, sitting in the dark, anyone in the room could have produced these items. But recall that one condition of the experiments was that each person entering the room was searched beforehand. As experiments progressed, audio and photographic evidence also appeared. Sounds recorded included music, knocking, and even conversations between spirits and the mediums, with observers claiming that the spirit voices did not appear to be coming from the mediums themselves. Photos were taken in the dark, and what appeared? Faces appearing to merge together with abstract shapes, small faces appearing in bubbles, designs, scenes from different parts of the world, writing. Yet the film, could it have not been tampered with before the seances? In later experiments, film that was confirmed to be sealed was used and locked inside of a small metal box for the duration of the seance. When scientists of various disciplines joined as observers, they actually chose which container of factory-sealed film would be used, signed the seal, and held the locked box in their own hands with the film in it. The film was developed in-house immediately. It was new and unused, yet after the sessions, images still somehow appeared on the film when it was developed. Note that this film was not even loaded into a camera. It was simply an unused, unopened roll of film. One drawing on film revealed a sketch for a trans-dimensional communication device. Reportedly, this sketch was created by none other than Thomas Edison, who also provided his signed initials on the film. When the signature was compared to known initial signatures made by Edison during his lifetime, the signatures were an exact match. The device was eventually constructed, and after some time working with it, the Scole experimenters began to have success with it. Voices came through, and the team had conversations with spirits using it. Eventually, the team became accustomed to working with a spirit team. Some of the same spirits appeared regularly and spoke of the fact that they too were conducting their own experiments from the other side of the veil. There was Mrs. Bradshaw, a well-spoken Victorian lady, Patrick McKenna, an Irish priest, Raji, an Indian prince, among many others. And it's here that we might note some oddness. The Bennets and Foys had been meeting twice a week in a darkened cellar for years. Many objective observers had come into the sessions and were amazed. They could find no means of fraud. A magician even came to sessions to gauge if the happenings were being faked, and he could find no use of trickery or sleight of hand. But the one aspect that wasn't questioned by anyone, it seems, was who exactly were the Bennets and Foys making contact with? A spirit team made up of former living humans? This assertion was simply accepted. After all, mediums make contact with the dead, right? When the group finally incorporated video into their spiritual settings, some strange sights were beheld. At this point, listeners are encouraged to look up some of the videos taken during the Scole experiments. Strange and otherworldly vistas appeared, blurred faces, and at one point, a face that looks like a gray, a type of alien creature often cited in abduction stories. One particularly haunting video shows an extreme close-up of an especially uncanny face, large eyes moving back and forth, seemingly scanning and searching for something. The feeling one gets from these videos is far from a friendly darting spot of light or an overly polite woman's voice coming from nowhere. All of this to say, who exactly had the Bennetts and Foys invited into their cellar? This question becomes more provocative when the ending of the Scole experiment is taken into account. The last meeting came about in 1998. A new spirit had come through and told the group that the experiment must stop. The reason? There were space-time problems that had been created by the experiments that related to an interdimensional doorway. The spirit team had begun to have problems communicating because researchers from the future were making things difficult. These future researchers, it was implied, had motives that were not entirely benevolent. An interdimensional doorway? Do we pass on to another dimension after death? Are the past and future simply different dimensions? What else, apart from humans, might exist in different dimensions? Had the Bennetts and Foys been in contact at times, or even the entire time, with non-human entities? There are a few aspects that remain certain in regard to the Scole experiment. Many researchers, experts, scientists, and engineers had been a part of it, and none could find any evidence of fraud. The Bennetts and Foys made no money from the experiment. They in fact turned down money offered by the Society for Psychical Research. They allowed their methods to be scrutinized and refined, and after 500 seances, they had, in the view of some scientists, offered the best proof of life after death produced. That is, if we make the assumption that it was indeed human spirits with whom they conversed. The Wandering Soul invites you to follow us on your favorite socials and to check out the Atomic Voodoo Lounge podcast with our friend Maxwell Vegas for something entirely different, yet wonderful. The Wandering Soul is written and produced by Wandering Nix. Our music is generously provided by John Osborne Farley, and you can find his work on Spotify and follow him on Facebook. This podcast is recorded and edited at Genesee Valley Media under the direction of Nick Davis. Follow Wandering Nix and The Wandering Soul on Facebook, and check back for more stories of the paranormal, the haunted, and the unusual. And wander with a friend so you don't get lost.
Gentle, still, and far above, with a gown.